So as it's just 7 minutes, we will make a start. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Meg Gundlach for tonight's talk on an overview of the Shabtis in the Egypt Centre collection. Meg arrived to Swansea 15 years ago now in order to undertake her MA in Egyptology, ancient Egyptian culture, as it was, intending to stay for just 1 year. But as often the case with research, as you get into it, you decide you want to go further. She ended up staying in Swansea in order to undertake her PhD research, which was on Shabtis, and one in particular, which you'll see highlighted in a little bit. She has worked in Egypt as well as the Sudan over the years, including as an object registrar. And now she's back in Swansea after several years abroad, and is looking to really do a lot more research on the Shabtis that we have in the Egypt Centre collection, of which she'll be presenting a very, very brief overview in tonight's lecture. So over to you, Meg.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks for being here, everyone. As Ken said, tonight I'm going to be giving an overview of the Shabtis in the Egypt Centre and the ongoing research regarding these objects. The Egypt Centre houses approximately 385 accession numbers for Shabti figures. However, throughout this study, some of the accession numbers have been separated while others have been combined. Furthermore, not all examples have yet been included into each type of analysis. So if you're the kind of person who likes to add up numbers as you go, they're rarely going to reach the total you expect. This is simply a collection of first notes, initial impressions, and points of interest. The study of Shabtis is a constant work in progress, and the increasing digitalization of collections is bringing more and more examples to light. Scholars of Shabtis tend to focus on specific individuals or burials, virtually reuniting dispersed corpora. The title of my talk is in reference to the Shabti spell, and because the Zoom platform has invited worldwide participation, tonight I'll be presenting a small selection of the named individuals in the Egypt Centre to give them their chance to declare, "Here I am." Most of our Swansea-based audience probably knows that I wrote my PhD on the Shabtis of the chief lector priest Pedamenope. Most commonly described as enigmatic, Pedamenope lived across the late 25th and early 26th dynasty transition. His burial, Theban tomb 33, is the largest private tomb in Egypt. My interest in the Shabtis began with my very first paper here in Swansea, which was a life cycle of an object in the Egypt Centre. I chose this lovely piece here, and I think you can probably see why it was just so inspiring to me. Luckily, they got better as I drew more examples into my collection. At the start of my research, there was commonly estimated to be between 60 and 100 Shabtis of Pedamenope scattered in collections around the world. Shortly after undertaking this study, the British Museum launched their online catalog, revealing that they had 99 examples all on their own. I currently have just under 300 identified to date, illustrating the dramatic impact that digitalization has on this type of research. However, that's all we're going to be discussing of Pedamenope tonight, so that might be a relief to some of you. After I finished my thesis, I still wasn't burnt out on Shabtis, so I decided to look into documenting the Egypt Centre collection with support from the AHRC Connected Communities Project Key Heritage Skills Program. The objective is to update the photos and information for the Egypt Centre's online catalog, as well as preparing the Shabtis for publication as part of Glenn Jane's Shabti Collection series. These invaluable volumes, so far authored by Glenn himself, were established to publish Shabtis in UK museums, when they often get overlooked for larger, more prestigious items. These included both large and small collections and aimed to particularly highlight the figures in smaller museums not otherwise known for their Egyptian artifacts. So I know we have quite a diverse audience. Before we start, it's probably a good idea to give an overview of what a Shabti actually is. Shabtis are perhaps one of the most prolific and recognizable artifacts from ancient Egypt. From their earliest attestations in the Middle Kingdom through to their decline in the Ptolemaic period, Shabtis enjoyed a nearly continuous use as a burial necessity for the elite. Despite their innumerable quantities, they remained strictly a prerogative of the upper class. On the most basic level, the function of a Shabti was to carry out work in the afterlife. The necessity for agricultural work in the afterlife is well established from the start of the dynastic period and was spurred on by the need for eternal subsistence. Furthermore, while the need was recognized early on, the ancient Egyptians sought ways to avoid the arduous manual labor for almost as long. Thus, the introduction of the Shabti guaranteed for the deceased the food needed for survival in the hereafter, without the requirement to procure it oneself. However, the way in which Shabtis carried this out changed over time. At their induction in the Middle Kingdom, Shabtis were viewed as a direct substitute for the owner, able to take on the manual labor of the deceased, and also serving in the event that the mummy itself was destroyed. This connection can be seen both through the resemblance to other funerary statuary, such as the Ka statue, the focus on portraiture, and the small quantity, with only one or two most commonly being known per owner. Beginning in the 21st dynasty, there can be seen a shift in ideology in regards to the Shabti with rapid depersonalization. The Shabti modified swiftly from a personal substitute to a servant, and correspondingly, the number of such per owner increased. Textual remains indicate that this vision of statuettes was much more than simply a trend, but is reflected in the few known monetary transactions in which they specify them as, quote, male and female slaves. While the documentary evidence is too scarce to warrant a discussion to the length of the use of this term, the large quantities of Shabtis appear to be utilized through their decline. It's also worth noting now that the three terms known to refer to these funerary statuettes, Shabti, Shawapti, and Ushabti, though the debate continues on the etymology difference between them. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to refer to them as Shabti through the rest of this talk. While I continue my historical overview, I'll now start pulling in some statistical analysis of the Egypt Center with the accompanying charts. From the earliest attestation of the Shabti to the last, mummiform was by far the most common style. Like most known mummiform images from ancient Egypt, these figures are shown as standing, with the lines of their body smoothed by wrap bandages. Their hands most often protrude from the wrapping, though examples are known with no hands at all. While the mummiform style of a Shabti is the most widely created, during the post-Amarna period a new form appeared. Rather than being depicted as standing mummiform figures, these new figures wear the clothing of the living. Their dress most often consists of an elaborately protruding kilt and a wig, which is more commonly known from festival scenes. While initially this seems to have simply been a new style of Shabti representation, by the Third Intermediate period, they were firmly equated with the position of overseer. These figures do not carry out the same function of manual labor that the others do, but as managerial posts that oversaw the work of the Shabtis. At their height of incorporation, there are 36 overseers included in a standard set to manage over a group of approximately 10 workmen each. This form of funerary figurine saw a limited span of use as compared to their harder working counterparts, with the last known example dating to the period of the divine adoratrice Nitocris I. There are of course a small number of other types of Shabti, but they're infrequently used and do not appear in the Egypt Center collections. As for the four labeled as unclear, the two of them are only heads and give no indication of what body would be attached. The other two, however, are these beauties. While it's almost certain they're just poorly made mummiform figures, I can't get over how lion-like their faces are. Hopefully, in this case, it does not indicate portraiture. Animal Shabtis are known from ancient Egypt, particularly those with the head of a bull. The Apis bull, the sacred manifestation of the god Ptah Memphis, is known to have enjoyed a full elite burial, and Shabtis dedicated to these animals have been found at the Serapeum of Saqqara. These Shabtis are distinctive, for while they have a standard human mummiform body, they can be topped with the head of a bull. While Shabtis for the Apis are known from the Ramesside period through to the late period, it's only in the 19th and 20th dynasties that they are shown with the head of the animal. Furthermore, it's notable that while there are other animals that were mummified and entombed, the Apis is the only cult animal known to have Shabtis created for their burial. Shabtis could be created in a variety of materials. At their introduction in the Middle Kingdom, they're primarily stone, particularly hard dark stones, although a number of wooden examples are known. Wood as a material becomes much more common through the Second Intermediate Period and into the New Kingdom. The Third Intermediate Period saw a rise in roughly made figures of faience, but during the 25th dynasty, there's a brief resurgence in the use of hard stones. Stone disappears completely in the early Saite period, and faience is the sole material for the remainder of the production of Shabtis. The majority held here by faience figures directly correlates to the preferential use of the material for the greatly increased quantities in the late period, which we'll come back to. Chronologically, only 3 periods of pharaonic history are represented in the Egypt Center, and the 134 late period examples are equal to all previous examples combined. Again, the distribution found in the Egypt Center is pretty typical given the huge numbers of faience Shabtis made in the late period. So we're now going to do a quick overview of the Egypt Center collection by period to give you an idea of development. The earliest Shabtis in the Egypt Center collection date to the New Kingdom, of which there are 45. It's worth noting that, though there are many wooden examples, there are no clear examples of a stick Shabti, which dates to the Second Intermediate Period. I did briefly think about the one on the left, but I'm pretty sure it's just a rather crude Ramesside example. The New Kingdom examples are some of the finest made objects in the Egypt Center collection, and the care taken in production is characteristic of the small number made for each individual in this time. Wood as a material is relatively rare in ancient Egyptian collections due to problems of preservation. The large percentage of wooden Shabtis seen here is fairly unusual and is no doubt due to the selective desires of the wealthy private collectors who built the foundations of the Egypt Center. Of the 45 New Kingdom Shabtis in the Egypt Center, 32 are inscribed, 21 of which have identified names. Moving into the Third Intermediate Period, there are 89 examples in the Egypt Center. 70 are clearly mummiform, while 16 wear the dress of daily life. At this point, wood completely disappears from the Egypt Center collection, and there's a rise in the less expensive materials of ceramic and faience. The one stone example is unusual for the Third Intermediate Period and may in fact date to a transition. So it will need more attention when we can possibly access the objects again. 53 of these Shabtis bear an inscription, 41 of which have names. The majority of those names likely come from the Ramesseum, an area that will come up again. The 134 late period Shabtis in the Egypt Center are now entirely mummiform. Overseer Shabtis were still possible at the beginning of the late period, but they're uncommon, so it's not surprising that we don't see any. Features specific to the late period include the addition of the back pillar and the plinth, both of which you can see on the right of the slide. Faience is again the most common material in the Egypt Center collection. With regards to the late period, stone is only used in 25th dynasty Thebes, and the example that you see listed here is actually the Pedamenope fragment. I'm sorry, don't tell him I screwed up his name. The Pedamenope fragment that I wrote my PhD on. By now, the majority of Shabtis are mass-produced and uninscribed. However, the nicely made ones tend to have lengthy inscriptions, including names, titles, and genealogy. Overall, 31 names have so far been identified on Shabtis in the Egypt Center. Names are obviously a priority for establishing dates in provenance, and even those that have previously been identified have had work done to clean them up and incorporate more recent spellings and information. The Shabtis of the Egypt Center represent nearly the whole length of the country, from Tel Nabasha in the north to Thebes in the south. The majority of those with known find spots are from the Theban area, likely due to the following factors. It's a better area for preservation. Shabtis and elite burials were in fashion for the entire period, and the excavations tend to have better documentation. The Ramesseum, as I mentioned, is a huge source of inscribed Shabtis from the 21st and 22nd dynasties, when it was an elite burial ground for the priesthood. This slide shows the names of all the individuals attested at the Ramesseum by Cobell on the left, with those also known from the Egypt Center highlighted in red. While it is of course possible that there are multiple individuals with the same name, it's an excellent starting point for parallels. The Egypt Center collection is composed of donations and loans from many other institutions. This is well represented in the Shabtis, where of course the bulk come from the Wellcome trustees. Additionally, there are 8 from the British Museum, 18 from the National Museum of Wales, Cardiff, 6 from the University of Wales, Aberystwyth, and 35 from Woking College. The sale and movement of artifacts is something that I'm particularly interested in. Obviously, Sir Henry Wellcome is the main collector here. Other previous owners include Lord Aberdare, Franklin Hood, Robert Mond. As Urson so aptly illustrated last week, it's often the less famous owners that turn out to be the most interesting. I'm particularly looking forward to researching previous owners such as James Spickett, whom I know nothing about. Also prominent in the documentation of these Shabtis is the J.C. Stevens auction rooms, which I had never previously heard of. The auction rooms were operational from 1834 to around 1940 and specialized in the sale of natural history specimens, but also sold curiosities and antiquities. Between 1928 and 1935, Wellcome, through agents, bought 10 of the Egypt Center Shabtis at 6 different auctions. Thus, though the focus was on natural history, the J.C. Stevens auction room clearly carried some quality Egyptian artifacts and was being carefully watched by Wellcome's men. So if we can now move in to some of the named individuals, which is perhaps what some of you have been waiting for. For those of you in the audience who have been to the Egypt Center, you're probably already acquainted with Ptah-hotep. He hangs out on the ground floor in the House of Death. Unlike many of the Shabtis in the Egypt Center collection, Ptah-hotep does not spend his days here in Swansea alone. In fact, there are 18 mummiform examples with 2 overseers to keep them in line. Ptah-hotep holds the title Scribe of Divine Offerings in the House of Amun, a title which appears on all 20 figures. These Shabtis are almost certainly Theban, based on both the typology and the affiliation with Amun indicated through the title. The 20 Shabtis of Ptah-hotep represent over half of the wooden examples in the Egypt Center collection. Wood was used on a large scale in the Second Intermediate Period and the New Kingdom, with the best examples dating from the 18th and 19th dynasties. The details of the figure were added in red and black paint. The inscription was applied in a single column down the front, and in the case of the 2 overseer figures, it continues underneath and down from the kilt. The yellow color is due to a varnish applied to the wood, which is common in dynasties 18 to 22. Though it may have been clear when applied and yellowed over time, yellow skin tones may also be read as a magical religious substitute for the golden flesh of the gods, and finds parallels on many other funerary items, including coffins. These Shabtis were purchased by Wellcome at Sotheby's in 1924 at the sale of the collection of Reverend Franklin Hood. The sales catalog further supports a Theban provenance, stating that it was the purchase location for most of Hood's collection. Lot 157, as seen here, specifically mentions 1 foreman and 9 Shabtis of Ptah-hotep. Likewise, a further 9 Shabtis plus 1 foreman appear in lot 158. Wellcome clearly felt the need to own the whole set, and he purchased both lots. Furthermore, you may have noticed that in the lot descriptions, the Shabtis were not the primary focus. Shabti boxes, created to be shaped as a shrine, came into fashion by the middle of the 18th dynasty, and their decoration followed innovations seen in full-size coffins. Ashton interprets the use of Shabti boxes as a predominantly Theban trend due to the limited amounts of comparative material elsewhere. While at the outset, each Shabti was given its own shrine, or at least a slot within it, the quickly multiplying numbers soon required an open form to the box in order to hold the maximum number possible. By the late period, the need for storage seems to have been abandoned entirely, with the Shabtis instead being lined up around the edge of the tomb, ready to respond to commands. Due to the haphazard dispersal of the Wellcome collection, both Shabti boxes are now in Birmingham, and all 20 Shabtis are in Swansea. When I began my research into the Shabtis of Ptah-hotep, only 1 box had been photographed for the online catalog. More recently, I borrowed this photo from the Birmingham Museum's website that indicates that only 1 of the boxes is currently on display. However, it is clear that this must be the box from lot 157, as you can clearly see Ma'at and Ra-Harakte, a pairing that does not appear on lot 158. The seeming discongruity of this division, with the boxes sent to Birmingham in 1969 and the Shabtis of Swansea 2 years later, has long been an issue of discussion and speculation. Surely, the more logical solution would have been to separate them as their original lots, of 1 box housing 9 Shabtis and an overseer. However, the increasing availability of Wellcome documentation online has provided some intriguing insights. The Wellcome collection was documented shortly after it was purchased through the so-called Wellcome slips, a card catalog type system recording the description, which was often taken directly from the sales catalog, the date of the sale, the price, and the storage location. Here, the box and figures of each lot have already been given separate slips. Furthermore, both boxes are listed as stored in case 2171, and both Shabti gangs listed in case 2166. Through agents, Wellcome actually purchased a large percentage of the objects from the Hood sale, and it is possible that the cases were numbered as they arrived from Sotheby's. Though many cards were later amended as the cases were unpacked, no such adjustments were recorded here. However, it's clear that at least the boxes eventually made it to display. As you can see, both boxes appear in the bottom shelf of this cabinet, with the lids on and no associated Shabtis. This suggests the boxes and figures have now been thoroughly disassociated, and the Shabtis housed elsewhere in the Mammoth collection. Thus, it appears that the disenfranchisement of the Ptah-hotep Shabtis from their boxes occurred long before the dispersal of the collection. In light of this early separation in storage and display, it's much more understandable how they were swept up into the waves of mass distribution. Hopefully here this gives you an idea of what a set would look like reunited. Not quite to scale, but still attractive. Because of the comparatively limited numbers used in the New Kingdom, and the fact that the known Shabtis of Ptah-hotep match the sales and collecting descriptions, it's very possible that this is a complete set and no parallels will be found. Iconographically, the case for this being a complete set is supported by the decorative scheme of the box, on which all 4 sons of Horus are already represented. The early collaboration between the Swansea branch of the Wellcome collection and the conservators of Cardiff University has been highlighted in several of the talks already. In fact, several members of the current conservation team will be giving the next talk Tuesday, July 7th. Being wooden, The Shabtis of Ptah-hotep are by nature high-risk objects, and at least 11 of them received conservation between 1978 and 1985. Thankfully, all of the associated reports indicate that the figures themselves are in excellent shape, requiring primarily cosmetic cleaning. The micro-reviews afforded in the conservation process have also recorded several observations with implications for Shabti manufacture. Moving into the third intermediate period, you'll see here the priest of Amun, the priest of Amun, overseer of the city, and vizier, Ankhpefhery. The documentation of this particular Shabti had previously been read as Neswechet ba Ankhpefhery, which is actually a combination of his name and titles, sort of. Re-identifying him as Ankhpefhery is not only a case of accuracy, but also provides a fascinating backstory. The Shabtis of Ankhpefhery were found in Tomb 3 at Akhorus, an area excavated in 1926 by an Egyptian team led by Abu Saif. In total, 380 Shabtis, along with 4 wooden coffins, were discovered for Ankhpefhery in a session by the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. This level of excavation detail makes it all the more remarkable that Wellcome bought one only 9 years later in London, from the aforementioned J.C. Stevens auction house. As far as I have found, the Egypt Center one is the only example known outside of Cairo. The mummiform Shabtis were made of faience, with the inscription added in a single vertical column on the front. The welcome slip records it as broken and repaired prior to 1935. Despite his Middle Egyptian burial, Ankhpefhery's titles suggest strong Theban links. This may be further supported by the Theban burial of a woman named Karamama, whose burial goods state she is the daughter of the vizier Ankhpefhery. Someone with clearer links to Thebes is our next individual, Ankhpefhery. Typologically, they're probably from the Ramesseum, and the name does appear on the names list. However, the name is very common and most famously includes the daughter of the pharaoh Shabako in the 25th dynasty, so searching for parallels requires care. Though only one is currently on display, the Egypt Center actually has 6 of her Shabtis. All 6 were formerly in the Lord Aberdare collection and came to Swansea from the National Museum of Wales in Cardiff. The mummiform Shabtis are made of blue faience and identified through a vertical column of inscription down the front. Also coming from the National Museum of Wales and Lord Aberdare collection are this pair representing the Chantress of Amun, Ankhpefhery. Like Isis and Kebet, the name Ankhpefhery is extremely common, and there's even another set of Shabtis with the same name in the Egypt Center collection. The location of her burial is unknown, and several have been suggested throughout the records. However, because of the frequency of this name in the Shabti corpus as a whole, many of the parallels cited prove to be different individuals. A Theban connection is most likely with the Amun-based title. Compared to some of the figures being highlighted tonight, these Shabtis are relatively crude. They're listed as ceramic, but may even be dry mud. Despite this, the clarity of the inscription testifies that they are actually well preserved as artifacts. Next up, we have Nespapernebeu, represented through these 6 unassuming foot portions. Nespapernebeu has a variety of titles, including priest, God's father, chief of the temple scribes in the house of Amun, and overseer of the recruits of Amun. His many titles seem to be used interchangeably on his Shabtis, with only one title per Shabti. Now, you may be asking yourself how I can make such definitive statements when only one of the Egypt Center examples really contains any signs other than his name. Well, that is because the burial of Nespapernebeu is exceptionally well documented, being part of the second Deir al-Bahari cache. Known as Bab el-Gusus, or Gate of the Priests, the second cache is located to the front of Deir al-Bahari. This tomb complex contained the burials of 153 priests and chantresses of Mumun, all dating to the 21st dynasty. The massive discovery was excavated by the Antiquities Service between the 5th and 13th of February, 1891. Though the sheer quantity of finds and speed of removal sometimes leads scholars to bemoan the limitations of documentation, for those of us that study Shabtis, it's actually comparatively plentiful. The Shabtis of Nespapernebeu are made of bright blue faience. The dimensions listed here are for fragments and represent only half of a complete figure. Though the portions in the Egypt Center are all clearly mummiform, several entries in the Catalogue General describe at least 5 overseer figures of Nespapernebeu, probably due to the further reduced space from the addition of the kilt. These Shabtis drop the titles entirely and are only inscribed with the Osiris Nespapernebeu. Unfortunately, no photo of the overseers were included, and I've yet to find one for comparison. What we do have is many examples in collections across the world, and even a basic Google search brings up more than a dozen examples. This is due to the history of the second cache collection, which is quickly becoming an area of study all to itself. The abbreviated version is this. After excavation in 1891, the entire contents of the second cache were brought to the museum in Cairo, severely stretching the limits of their storage abilities. 2 years later, 1893, a new cadaver succeeded, and the absurd quantity of objects recently acquired were identified to be the perfect party swag. A lottery was set up for the countries, with representatives attending the celebrations. 17 lots were established, each containing 4 or 5 coffins and a large number of smaller items. Through this method of distribution, Nespapernebeu was transferred directly to museums around Europe and the States. You may also notice that a majority of these comparison figures are complete. What is less clear is how the 6 fragments now in Swansea came to be in the possession of Henry Wellcome. Hopefully, the ongoing digitalization of the Wellcome records may shed more light on that in the near future. The complete examples are usually around 11 centimeters, but can be up to 18. In addition to as many Shabtis, excavation records attribute a number of other burial goods to Nespapernebeu, including 2 Shabti boxes. Darcy recorded a total of 110 Shabti boxes from the second Diyarbakir cache for 58 different people. That comes out to roughly 2 each, and indeed that is exactly the number owned by Nespapernebeu. The example shown here is now in Toulouse, while the location of the other is less clear. Another individual who is only partially represented in the Egypt Center is Nespapernebeu. He also arrived in Swansea via Sir Henry Wellcome and is likely from the Ramesseum, where the name does appear on the names list. Despite missing both his head and feet, the majority of the inscription remains in the single vertical line down the front. Furthermore, while our example appears to be pale green, the small patches of bright blue attest to the original color. Like so many of the figures from the Ramesseum, the Shabtis of Nespapernebeu are plentiful and widely distributed. Though we do not currently have the information for Wellcome's acquisition, most of the parallels can be linked back to the Egyptian research account and the 1896-7 excavations of Petrie and Quebel. Moving now into the late period, the changes in Shabti production and typology are quite evident in the examples of Ankhpefhery here. The Egypt Center's figure was gifted by the British Museum in 1980, but a majority of the comparative examples can be traced to the 1902-1903 excavations of Grenfell and Hunt on behalf of the Egypt Exploration Society. Made of green faience, Shabtis of this period now sport a back pillar and plinth, both of which can be seen on the Shabtis of Ankhpefhery. The inscription is arranged in 7 horizontal bands that run around the body and is remarkable for several reasons. Firstly, while Ankhpefhery and his mother Tameri are both mentioned, he's not accredited with any titles, which is fairly unusual for an inscription of this length. Furthermore, there are several issues with the text that seem to be particular to the Egypt Center example. For instance, the section outlined here is repeated twice, indicating that there was some confusion when one line ended and then they started another. There's also a general sense of poor spatial planning, as the hieroglyphs outlined here in red were squeezed onto the side of the back pillar, and the entire last line was written on the top of his feet. Like many of the Shabtis dispersed through excavation patronage, the Shabtis of Ankhpefhery have been widely scattered throughout the UK, Europe, and as far as Canada. Other examples from the Egypt Center collection are uninscribed but have unusual typological features that need more comparative material. These figures, for example, are clearly shown with breasts. While breasts are known on Shabtis, they're primarily confined to the Ramesseum period. Furthermore, those figures are shown in the dress of daily life, which is more conducive to emphasizing the realistic female form than that of a mummy. It'd be a real shame if you left here today thinking all of the Shabtis in the Egypt Center were fine works of art. To that end, our final discussion will focus on a set that I affectionately refer to as Squishy Face. These come from Peachey's excavation at Tel Dabasha, which was carried out in the 1880s for the Egypt Exploration Fund. However, the then Egypt Exploration Society transferred these Shabtis and the other remaining excavation materials to the British Museum in 1976, who then offered them to Swansea in 1978. The mummiform figures are crudely molded fans with distinctively buggy eyes. While there is a column of inscription, it's incredibly difficult to decipher. Typically, further insight can perhaps be sought from the comparative material, of which there are many. The examples here represent a selection only from the British Museum, Petrie Museum, and Boston Museum of Fine Arts, all of whom received them directly from the Egypt Exploration Fund in 1887. However, in the case of these figures, further examples only muddle attempts at translation with their almost chaotic combination of signs. Focusing specifically on the examples here in the Egypt Center, several anomalies can be noted, even limited to these three. For example, it would appear that the Neb sign is inverted on the center figure, making it instead a T. Furthermore, on the two outer examples, both the K and M signs are backwards for what you would expect in a right-facing inscription. This is actually the case for most of the comparative material I've found, but the M has been correctly inscribed on at least two figures, while the K remains inverted. What makes these two examples even more intriguing is that they have identical inscriptions, especially compared to the rest of the corpus, but significantly different paleographic features, indicating that they may have been carved by different people. Though the center Shabti from the Egypt Center is broken at this point, close examination shows a surprisingly well-carved ma'at, adding to the confusion. Finally, returning to the top of the inscription, though all three start with the invocative, only the outer two follow this sign with the sh sign. This may be vital to an interpretation of the inscription. Based with these three examples, I believed that this was a mangled and corrupted attempt at the Shabti spell that was created by an artist who did not know or did not care how to complete it. The Shabti inscription commonly begins with the invocative, calling on the Shabtis to come forward and work. Coupled with the sh, the first letter of the word Shabti, this seemed like a logical interpretation, particularly in this era of decline. However, once again, pulling on the comparative material only further confuses the issue. Though their many similarities have caused myself and other Shabti scholars to regard them as a set, it's perhaps time to consider that there may be multiple individuals represented here, produced in the same workshop. Even with this concession, no clear translation has been proposed for any one example. As though they have not yet caused enough trouble, the 3 inscribed examples certainly go with this set of uninscribed figures based on their size, material, and general state of their faces. Of the uninscribed examples, the Egypt Center has just over 100, with small numbers also distributed to other museums by the Egypt Exploration Fund in 1887. This slide gives you a general idea of what the set would look like together, with only the figures from here in Swansea. I'm not quite masochistic enough to edit all the photos just for this slide, so I must confess it's the same one duplicated, but you get the picture and perhaps did not even notice. Future plans for the continued study of the Shabtis in the Egypt Center collection include transcription and translation of the remaining inscribed figures, identification of further individuals, the never-ending hunt for parallels, potentially narrowing down some of the unknown find spots based on typology, and finally, publication. Huge thanks are of course due to the Egypt Center for allowing ongoing access to this collection. Thanks also go out to the AHRC Connected Communities Project Key Heritage Skills Program for supporting the initial analysis that kicked off this study. I'd also like to thank my fellow Shabti enthusiasts, Ken Griffin, Glenn James, and the late Anthony Donahue for their collaboration. And of course, I thank all of you for listening to me once again drone on about Shabtis. Please stay safe, everyone.